want to thank everybody for joining our inaugural market briefing. These sessions are designed to provide partners, carriers, and the wider market with expert analysis that helps you stay ahead of the curve with the latest trends and insights that are impacting the unified communications as a service space. All of these updates are going to be hosted by our newly appointed Director of Strategy and Alliances, Matt Batterbee. Matt joins us with over a decade of global leadership experience focused on empowering Microsoft partners, driving their business growth and market differentiation. Many of you may already know him from his time with Pax8, Ingram Micro, and Microsoft directly. Today, we're also joined by a very special guest and a friend of SIPPIO, Patrick Watson, Director of Research at Cavell. Matt and Patrick have a great session lined up for you all, looking at the trends and the innovations that are driving the market today. And hopefully at the end of this, you'll walk away understanding how you can action on that insight to set yourself up for success this quarter and then well into next year as the economy starts to kind of go its way. This will be the insight that will help you jump ahead of the market and accelerate into 2026 and beyond. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to our friends Matt and Patrick, and I look forward to having a great session. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much, Steve. Great warm introduction there. Really appreciate it. And it is a pleasure to be presenting once again. It's been a few months since I've done anything like this, so slightly nervous, but we're looking forward to it. And Patrick and I have had a few calls about this, and we've got some great insights and things that we're going to talk about today. So just to further introduce myself, I'm based out of the UK, so it is nicely in the afternoon, based out in North Wales, and I thought I would bring some of beautiful North Wales behind me there in the backdrop. Patrick, do you just want to do a quick introduction of yourself as well?
Yeah, pleasure to be here, Matt, and Steve. Thanks for the intro. As you said, friend of SIPPIO. So Patrick Watson, Director of Research at Cavell. We are a completely independent research and consultancy firm that's been conducting research on the communications markets for more than 15 years now across UCaaS, CCaaS, cloud comms, and now we've expanded our research portfolio to reflect more and more technology convergence. I think a lot of the stuff that we're going to talk today about, Matt.
Amazing. So yeah, we can get stuck straight into it. And the way that we're going to kind of host these, and I will say actually before we get into any sort of questions and topics of discussion, if you do have any questions, please do use the Q&A. We will address those at the end. Yeah, we want to make sure that this is interactive, this is engaging, and that we answer your questions. So please do get those into the Q&A. But yeah, we are going to host these in a bit of a Q&A type fashion. We had a conversation about it, Patrick and I, and we decided we didn't just want to do kind of only have PowerPoint talk through those, but have more of a discussion. So hopefully that comes across well and you enjoy it. But first question that I do have for you, Patrick, I think it's always important, you know, we've looked at this as a market briefing, so let's start by looking at the market, the growth. Where are we today? Where are we going? And what the drivers are? And then also, I'm always interested to see if these change regionally. So over to you.
Yeah, I think it's a key point for this. Whenever we talk about the opportunity, whether like Steve was mentioning up top, we're talking about UCaaS or we're talking about contact center or whatever that opportunity is. I think it is really important to quantify it as a first point of view. You know, how big is it? Is there enough of a pie for everyone, you know, all of your SIPPIO partner network to take advantage of? And I think the short answer to that, Matt, and I have, although Matt and I agreed we don't want to kill you death by PowerPoint, I have prepared some slides just to augment my general presentation today. So if we look first of all at the global data that we carry from Cavell. So at Cavell, we carry data for telephony markets across more than 190 countries. If for anyone, I said this to Matt yesterday, I'm repeating this joke. If anyone wants to go to Barbados and count the amount of, you know, cloud comms users in that market, I'd be more than happy to go there. Additionally, but overall on a global scale, we track more than 450 million business telephony users. And I think the really interesting point on that is you've got 400 plus million users. Only around a quarter of those are actually using a public cloud multi-tenant hosted PBX solution or UCaaS solution. So that just shows markets like, and you talked about the regional differences, Matt. So the North American market, if we take for an example, so the US, incredibly advanced market, already more than 60% of the users are using some form of public cloud multi-tenant solution for their communication. So that might be a cloud-based PBX software, switch, it might be a bespoke UCaaS solution. So markets like North America, much more advanced. European markets, it depends where you go. Markets like the UK, Matt, both you and I in the UK, slightly behind the States, around 60% penetrated. But then if you go into Western Europe, if you look at markets like France or Germany, considerably less so. We also covered global data. So if you look at emerging markets, if you look at LATAM, if you look at Africa, generally the penetration rates tend to be significantly less. They're much more dependent on mobile business solutions, and they're less likely to be using cloud-based telephony. And that gets us to this overall global picture of around about 25% of those users, if you look on a global basis, are actually using the cloud. So there's huge scope there. So if you think around 120 million cloud users globally, we've still got 300 million users to go out in terms of that growth rate. And also, Matt, I know at SIPPIO you've done a lot of work in the customer experience field, enabling your partners to sell contact center solutions and informal contact center. So I thought it'd just be worth looking at the agent market as well, because that's another thing we track at Cavell. We track more than 15 million contact center agents globally. And now, Matt, that we're going to talk about, I've managed to hit AI quite early. I know we're going to talk about AI throughout the discussion today, but those might be not even human agents anymore. These could be virtual agents in the contact center. We're seeing that a lot more. But out of those human agents, still only around 3 million of them are actually using CCaaS solutions at the moment. So there's real scope for growth. So for any partners on the call who are selling UCaaS or CCaaS solutions, you've still got a huge amount of the global market. And even in these, what we're talking about, mature markets, North America, Western Europe, there's still millions of users that are going to migrate to cloud over the next few years.
That's awesome. And I will say, I mean, some of the things that I've been looking at in terms of the drivers side of it, and I think you mentioned AI, so I'll hit that one first, but that is a big driver. Businesses want in that kind of sentiment analysis or advanced performance metrics from a phone system. But some of the other drivers that I've definitely looked into, and by all means add to this or say if you've spotted any other ones, but cost effectiveness is definitely a key one that I keep hitting up against time and time again. I think I'll probably mention we're in the era of consolidation a few times on this call, of businesses wanting to consolidate their services, their providers, their vendors, but also digital transformation. And I think it's an interesting one because we mentioned AI being this big driver, and we're going to talk about AI, but we are still in an era where, okay, digital transformation was a great buzzword 5 years ago. It still is. I speak to so many MSPs that they're trying to sell AI, and I'll almost pick on Microsoft partners a bit. The end goal is Microsoft Copilot, but they're speaking to businesses that use Post-it notes on a whiteboard for their project management tool. They're not there yet. They need that digital transformation. Other kind of drivers that I've seen, more sectors requiring cloud telephony functionality, not just IT and telecoms, high-speed internet being a big driver, leading to better quality calling, and also businesses thinking more about business continuity and those advanced capabilities, the scalability of it all. And then an interesting one, and there's a talking point later on actually around this, but one other that I saw that was really interesting to me was really after that seamless collaboration, and particularly integration with the CRM and ERP systems, which is a big driver that I'm seeing. Are there any others that you're seeing, or do you see those as well?
No, I would absolutely agree with all of that. And I think just going back to your point on the different regions, I think we not only do we see different growth, but to your point, we see different drivers in different regions. So what I've pulled up here are the growth figures that we're expecting. So these are net new cloud communications users that Cavell are forecasting by 2030. So if you look at somewhere like the US, it's already a very mature market. But we still think there are more than 9 million net new cloud users that are going to move away from legacy premises-based systems over the next 5 years. And Matt, if you look at markets, so really developed markets like the US, the UK, what they tend to be looking for is more advanced feature sets that are driving cloud-to-cloud migrations. Also, one of the things that we've heard recently, Matt, is increasing demand for end-to-end security and compliance requirements being a key cloud-to-cloud driver. So in those more mature newer markets, the UK, the US, the Netherlands, it's feature functionality, it's what security is within the cloud platforms. In more less developed cloud markets, so you look at Germany, you look at France, actually it tends to be like you said, some of those legacy assets are coming to end of life. These assets are coming to 5, 7, 8, 10 years of age. Are you going to replace them with another premises-based PBX? If you look at Germany, for example, the issues that Mitel and Unify have had, which is a very popular platform there, that's creating a lot of uncertainty over these traditional premises-based assets. And actually, a lot of customers within the German market are thinking now is the time to move. They might not be looking for the most advanced functionality in the cloud, but actually they're going to move away from those legacy assets. And we're forecasting 6 million users in that German market. So if you look at France and Germany combined over the next 5 years, that's going to be a bigger net new opportunity than in the United States. So yeah, really good point. I think we see the drivers vary by region, but I think the overwhelming thing to take from this number is the size of the opportunity.
Yeah. And whenever I look at a market opportunity, I always want to look at what's going to drive the fastest ROI, for the partners, for customers. So what are the voice or unified collaboration solutions? Which ones are growing the fastest? What are you seeing there?
Well, so it's really interesting. I think since the post-pandemic, we're on the Microsoft Teams platform today. We can't ignore Teams as one of the market's leading platforms. And partly because of Microsoft have now obviously unbundled Teams from 365. That was their decision globally. I think that inclusion within the productivity suite gave Teams a distinct advantage. I think if you talk to Slack, they would agree with that. But Teams has seen some remarkable growth. We're talking about maybe 500 million Office 365, Microsoft 365 users. We're not going to be far behind that on Teams collaboration users. But Teams telephony is something that we're seeing real uptake on through direct routing, Operator Connect, and also some demand in places for Teams Phone Mobile and still Microsoft's domestic calling plans. But what I really wanted to highlight on, and I'll bring up another slide here, is just in terms of what we're seeing for other platforms as well. So as you can see, this dark line here is this is telephony enabled users, and I've looked specifically at the US here, Matt, as one of the most developed markets. But if we look at Microsoft Teams telephony enabled users, as of the end of this year, 2025, there'll be roughly 11 million, 12 million Teams telephony users in the States. Most of them using direct routing, although Operator Connect's growing in popularity. We also see a strong growth forecast for other UCaaS platform providers. So that might be a NetSapiens, Crescendo, it might be a Dialpad, some of those emerging users, but also really strong growth on both Zoom, and also this blue line here is Cisco, but that is not WebEx. So I wanted to call that out specifically because we've actually seen some really impressive growth on WebEx calling. What we do anticipate is we will see a bit of a fall off in the traditional BroadSoft base, and that will see we'll see a bit of a decline away from Cisco overall. But actually, if you look at the WebEx calling line, we've definitely heard over the past few months that the WebEx calling has actually been one of the most popular platforms. Cisco, and I know providers like yourselves and partners like yourselves with Cisco have really worked on that migration journey to help Cisco's huge base of customers move to WebEx calling. And so I think Teams, we're going to see really impressive growth, but also across WebEx and Zoom and those other UCaaS providers. I think the distinction we need to look at, Matt, is that really the large providers have got that development capacity. Microsoft spend 19 billion pounds on research and development. Cisco will spend, billions of dollars, Zoom hundreds of millions, billions of dollars on development. Those large providers really do have an advantage when it comes to enabling some of those features.
Yeah, and I know this is US specifically, and I like to consider myself somewhat of a data geek. And whenever I look at data like this, and I look at a specific country, in particular US and UK, what I tend to see is globally the numbers will differ, but the lines behave similarly. Would you say the same?
Yeah. I would completely agree. Well, I'll tell you what. There's a really good example of that. Let's look at Microsoft specifically, and this time I've grouped it regionally in terms of both the USA and Europe. So this is just Microsoft Teams telephony, and I've set the bars are segregated here by, as you can see, the majority of users deployed via direct routing within the market. But we do see, as you can see, Operator Connect, which I know SIPPIO, you've done a lot of work at enabling your partners to equip Operator Connect. We're forecasting really strong growth on Operator Connect. It offers users and end businesses that much more easily available option in terms of deploying and administering new users. The whole premise that Microsoft brought Operator Connect in for. So we think by 2027, 2028, Operator Connect will actually become the dominant deployment method for Teams. But you're absolutely right, Matt. What we see slight variations regionally, and obviously some vendors do slightly better. You see Zoom tends to do slightly better in APAC, Cisco, very strong base in North America and Western Europe, but also into LATAM and the Middle East as well. So the lines do vary a bit as you go around the world, but ultimately you're right. All of those large platforms, we do anticipate those lines going up, and ultimately it's an opportunity for everyone on this call.
Amazing. And then when I think about the opportunity in it, when I was joining SIPPIO, one of the first things I was looking at, and maybe it's coming from my Microsoft background, and I was thinking, okay, I know that a lot of service providers, a lot of technology providers, they want to drive AI. So I was kind of thinking, okay, what's the opportunity, the AI opportunity, and where does voice fit in with that? And I've really got engrossed in all of that. But what I've also seen is an ever-growing list of voice agents on the market. So I was really interested in how you see that is impacting the market today, and how you think potentially long-term that's going to impact the market as well.
Yeah, that is a really key question. So we every year interview and survey hundreds of service providers. So the technology vendors themselves. So your Microsofts, your Cisco's, your tier one service providers. So your AT&Ts, your Verizons in the States, Telus in Canada, BT, Telefonica around Europe. We survey hundreds and interview hundreds of these partners. And every year we ask a question about who do you perceive to be the biggest threat to your business? Yeah. And for the first time this year, actually, Matt, the largest majority of people said AI native startups. And what I wanted to just bring to your attention here on this particular slide was the amount of sort of providers offering voice agents in the market. We've done some analysis at this from a Cavell perspective, and as you can see here, there are hundreds of providers. We've segmented these by vertical, but hundreds of providers, and lots of people in the audience would probably be familiar with some of these names. What they've done is they've raised hundreds of millions of dollars in seed funding, often within some in the individual businesses, billions of dollars overall. But the really interesting thing, Matt, is not a lot of these providers have a diverse route to market. A lot of them have got a direct sales approach. They developed a website that's very specifically set up around a particular vertical, but they don't have that traditional route to market that a lot of SIPPIO's partners will have. They don't have that customer base. They don't have that go-to-market motion, which is going to be so critical for success in a lot of markets like North America and Western Europe. So one thing, we've done a lot of analysis at this from Cavell, and we do think we're going to see there's been huge investment in this space, and obviously providers do see it as a competitive to their existing voice roadmap. But ultimately, we think there's going to be a lot of consolidation here. A lot of these businesses aren't going to be able to sustain the initial growth that they've had with those go-to-market models. They're going to need help either from partner networks, providers like SIPPIO, or they're going to get acquired and agglomerated and put into larger providers. So it's a really interesting point that you made, and it's become a sort of vast map, but we do expect that to consolidate over the next few years.
Yeah, I think it's almost a spoiler for a topic coming up, but I think one thing that's really interesting when I look at this voice agent slide, and I did a bit of looking into the voice agents kind of space, you're seeing they are built very bespoke for an industry or even for a department. And I think that's probably why we're seeing, those big providers really highlighting these as a concern, as a competitor, because I've seen this CRM, ERP focused in the Dynamics 365 world of Microsoft. And I always saw, we were competing with very specific CRM solutions that were built for manufacturing. That's all they did. They only provided solutions for that market, but they did it very well. Seeing that the voice agents market is very similar.
Yeah, I completely agree. And we're going to talk about, verticalization as a differentiator for your partners as well. But you're absolutely right. What we've seen is a very vertical specific focus from these voice agent providers. But like I said, I still think that lack of direct go-to-market, that lack of necessarily indirect go-to-market is still going to, potentially be a barrier. But yeah, I completely agree. We've seen a very focused, and that's generally what we tend to see with digital and online sales, that you can develop a very specific direct go-to-sales sales motion effectively. But how sort of viable is that in the long term? So I still think we're going to see a fair amount of consolidation here, despite the huge investment that we've seen so far.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. And then sticking with the topic of AI for a little bit longer, but I've definitely seen a lot of talk, a lot of the new buzzword of the intelligent workplace. We've kind of gone beyond the modern workplace, the intelligent workplace, and even seeing a shift of MSPs, managed service providers, wanting to become MIPs, managed intelligence providers. So for technology providers looking to expand more into the AI space and enable their customers to successfully adopt AI, what trends are you seeing, and what these technology providers need to do, and what need to be aware of in order to be successful?
Yeah, I think it's something that we've been thinking about a lot of Cavell. And as I said, we do a lot of interviews with providers in the industry, so the vendors, the telcos, communication service providers. We do a lot of channel focused research. We track more than 20,000 channel providers in the US, for example, and look at what they're selling. And one of the concepts that we've been developing over the past number of years, to really try and understand what enterprise want, is this concept of the intelligent workplace. And the intelligent workplace is really a hypothetical concept of what an end user business is working towards. So ultimately, they want to be able to communicate, collaborate, and analyze data. And they want to be able to do that, Matt, as you know from your past background, across their communication system. So that might be their UCaaS system, it might be their CCaaS system. It also, you mentioned CRM before. CRM, a huge data resource within a lot of businesses. Or it might be their productivity suite. It might be their Google Workspace. It might be their Microsoft 365 accounts. But at the moment, effectively, those systems are generally quite siloed and are isolated to those individual business systems. What the intelligent workplace, what we've been looking at, is a more open, interoperable dynamic between these business systems. So you allow them to be open and interoperable. You use SDK, use application programming interfaces, APIs, in order so that these systems can be integrated. And that allows data to flow throughout these systems. That allows you to consolidate and automate workflows that might go through the UCaaS system into your contact center and then into your CRM and then back again. But the key thing for that is it allows you to utilize intelligence across your communication stack. It's not isolated in your contact center. It's not isolated in your CRM. And that's the real concept of the intelligent workplace, that it's not just, an intelligent UCaaS system. It's not just an intelligent CCaaS system. It's actually the whole ecosystem. And I think the final point on that as well, Matt, is being able to wrap all of that in security and compliance. That is a really key demand for businesses and enterprises around the world. That we've got this huge focus on AI. What's the key underpinning thing that's going to enable AI? It's data. What do you have to make sure is secure and compliant is your data. So that's the initial concept of the intelligent workplace.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm going to say, for anyone who's going to be on a call with me anytime soon, you're going to hear me say this analogy a lot. So please forgive me. But an analogy that I've been using quite a bit lately is, especially when I hear, providers wanting to really drive into AI, but they're maybe not thinking about voice. And I kind of explain it in terms of AI is essentially a jigsaw, and it doesn't matter what piece is missing. If you don't have all the pieces, you do not have a completed jigsaw. You do not have a completed AI tool. And voice, as you mentioned, it's now a data source. It's not just a utility. And a legacy PBX system is now essentially just a data silo that the AI can't access. And I'm definitely seeing this. When I look at managed intelligence providers and what they're looking to achieve, there's also a lot of risks that come with that in terms of inaccuracy risks. You know, a lot of businesses want AI to be the magic button, and there's huge risks there if the AI tool is inaccurate, or there's regulatory compliance issues and data privacy issues. And I will say, you know, when I think about SIPPIO, and I think, okay, so built on the Azure platform, so you know, features like encrypted calling for that kind of peace of mind, and then also enabling AI tools like Copilot to harness the data. All of a sudden that jigsaw is getting complete. You've got that voice data, it's driving better AI accuracy. So, you know, even if for any technology provider out there that comes across this, or is in the audience thinking of super key, it's a huge piece of the jigsaw puzzle. And if AI is the end goal and enabling your customer with AI, voice is a huge value add there, and it's going to help drive that accuracy and add more value to your customers and make you more sticky.
Yeah, I completely agree. Voice is such a key component within the intelligent workplace, and we were talking about it when we were doing the planning for this session. You know, if you're missing out voice, it's potentially such a critical component of the jigsaw puzzle. If you think of the amount of data points that you can get from an asynchronous interaction, like a message between me and you, Matt. Okay, you can read a little bit into what the contents of the message is, but compare that to a voice interaction where you talked about sentiment analysis and tone and pace and all of those things that you get from a voice interaction. From an alleles of data point, voice is a much richer medium. So I think it's absolutely key for providers to really factor voice into their consideration. There was one other thing that I wanted to talk about on the sort of intelligent workplace factor. I think it absolutely chimes with what you're saying, Matt, there. So what we've seen is providers still communication providers still look at maybe the top of the iceberg. So this traditional product focus, looking at you know, the transactional sale. But actually, what they now need to look at in order to enable all of those pieces of the intelligent workplace that we talked about, and is actually all of these other areas. So do you have integration capability? Are you able to automate customer workflows across that intelligent workplace stack? So that might be, as we said, through the UCaaS system into the contact center, back to the UCaaS system, and then back to your CRM. Are you able to assist your customers with that? Additionally, now that all of these systems are converging, and we're talking, Matt, we've already mentioned, you know, CRM, AI, contact center, UCaaS, you could be dealing with 5 or 6 different buyer personas within any one business. Purchasing technology is now becoming a much more holistic decision. So any of your partners need to be able to, you know, deal with a much wider range of buying stakeholders than previously. You know, 20 years ago when I was in sales, it was very much a tech-led decision. You were talking to the head of IT or whoever that might be. That is not the case anymore. It's a much more rounded decision. And that's also led to these evolving channel models. And I know that's something that SIPPIO has thought about a lot with its various partnership models and equipping as many different types of partners as possible. That's leading to this evolving channel models. You know, we're seeing more agency in Europe. We're also seeing more resale models in the US, but then we're seeing more agency to deal with more complicated sales processes and minimize regulation for partners. We're seeing this evolving channel picture. And then finally, Matt, just to pick up the piece that you mentioned, which is absolutely key to this, the thing that underpins everything and is so important is that data. You know, are you able to help customers rationalize, understand, and organize their data in a way that they can really leverage intelligence on top of it? So these are sort of the things, if you want to be enabling the intelligent workplace, it's more than just, you know, oh, can we, you know, sell AI? Can we sell Copilot? Actually, it's that range of services underneath that you've talked about.
Yeah, and I think this came up in one of our previous conversations, but we were talking around how, you know, some people perceive voice as almost not many people are making calls, you know, or that kind of, but where actually, in my personal experience over the last couple of years, I've had more phone calls around business than ever before, and sometimes that can even be internal calls that be very easy to host in Teams call. But I think because we're moving into this hybrid, this remote environment, what it's actually leading to is, yeah, I've got the flexibility. I'm in my office surrounded by my daughter's birthday presents, but sometimes I want to be able to think when I'm on these calls. And actually taking the dogs out for a walk whilst on a call and having a conversation, it's a great way to get mine going, a change of scenery. Maybe I've been on back-to-back calls for 6 hours and I just want to get out. and it's a call that I can go and do that. It's maybe me and my boss, and we're having a conversation and we're throwing ideas around. I'm going to get better ideas maybe out of the office. And I think I've experienced that more and more over the last couple of years. So I would actually say the complete opposite. Voice is more and more a part of day to day. And I think if you enable it in a better way, even more so, because then all of a sudden AI can take your notes for you and so on, and it becomes more valuable.
Yeah, I completely agree. And Matt, we've done some research on this specifically. We looked at, we did some research of how different generations like to communicate within business.
Yeah.
Because one of the misconceptions and preconceptions that we had was that the younger generations don't like to use voice or don't like to use telephony as much. Actually, that research is available. If anyone wants to research, head to cavell.com, and that generational research is available for free. Actually, what we found out was that is not the case. The younger generations are perfectly happy to use voice. And the really interesting thing, Matt, was as soon as in a consumer example, as soon as you or I need to escalate anything, you come away from email, chat, web chat, all of those things straight to voice. That is the absolute primary medium for anything urgent or complicated. And we talked about the boom in that voice agent market before. Actually, one of the theories around that is this boom in voice agents will actually create a huge increase in voice traffic, because there'll be more capability of dealing with these voice interactions. So that's something that we're seeing from a research perspective. And I completely agree. I think voice is not going away in terms of importance. We're not going to see this transition to messaging. And in fact, as the technology gets better, people are likely to use voice and voice even more for more and more complicated interactions.
Yeah, and it's funny you saying around when you want to escalate something, the amount of times in previous roles or even in these roles where you go back and forth with someone on Teams, and then all of a sudden you see them typing, and then all of a sudden they stop typing and your phone rings, and it's because they just want to get off Teams. They're just like, I don't want to type anymore. Let's just talk about it. So it's you're absolutely right. As soon as you've got that opportunity to let's call it escalate, it just ends up a phone call is so much more valuable. So really great. And then thinking forwards, like we always like to do when we're looking at anything like this, what are areas of expansion that you're seeing, and what are technology providers kind of considering as the next steps? What are you seeing there?
Yeah, so this is a really interesting piece, and Matt, I'll be completely transparent about this. We want to know this from a Cavell perspective so that we can create the right research. We need to know about what areas that, as I said, we've come out of UCaaS market sizing, we've moved into contact center, and now we cover a wider proportion of the intelligent workplace across security and other areas. But from a Cavell selfish perspective, we wanted to know what was relevant, and as I said, any questions in the audience, we'd love to hear those on different areas. But what I wanted to bring up was what we put together from one of our latest surveys, and again, this is from a combination of interviews and online survey that we did with hundreds of communication providers around the world. We looked at on the left hand side, you've got current importance, and on the x-axis we've got future importance. And so what you can see here is you've got technologies like unified communication, so UC, UCaaS at the top here, already considered really important, security, contact center, but as you go to the right, providers think these are going to become more popular in the future. So you've got areas like messaging services, and I know SIPPIO, you've added messaging capability into your platform in a number of areas. That's going to be increasingly important for providers. One of the areas that I think is really interesting here, that's highlighted as not particularly important at the moment, but will be in the future, is the Internet of Things. We did a project with a Canadian carrier, and we talk about verticals again, Matt, but agriculture, massive vertical in Canada. It's one of their biggest exports in terms of agricultural goods and services, and this particular carrier does a huge amount of work in terms of enabling agricultural devices that feed back to smart networks. So I think lots of these areas are really interesting. The ones that we're focusing on most from the Cavell perspective are the ones that are important now are going to be in the future. So you're looking at security, you're looking at contact center, you're looking at messaging services. But I wanted to go one step further than that. So I just pulled out some of the more detailed data from our survey, and I've sorted this from left to right in terms of the largest planning to offer. And again, this comes from our biggest communications service providers. So as you can see, we were talking before about the intelligent workplace and automating workflows for customers. business process automation actually came out as the #1 area that communication service providers are looking to work in, closely followed by cybersecurity, which we've talked about already, the digital workplace, and also document management and organization systems really high up. So I think this gives you an idea of there are loads of different areas of technology. The final one I wanted to pick out here was CCAS, which comes quite low down, but as you can see, it's already, because more than 70% of the communication service providers that we spoke to, they already offer CCAS. So that limits the scope in terms of sort of planning to offer. But I thought it was interesting: business process automation, cybersecurity, and the digital workplace, some of the most popular areas of expansion.
Yeah, and then what was interesting for me, keep this slide up, because obviously coming from my background, I spent years working with I mentioned Dynamics 365 space. The bottom two are CRM and ERP, but what makes it even more interesting is one of the biggest drivers for cloud telephony is that integration with the CRM and ERP. So it almost tells me that, service providers, they want to expand, but it's almost not too far out of the comfort zone. Would that sound right?
Yeah, I think we had a little chat about this yesterday, and I think one of the communication service providers and service providers of any type, whether it's a managed service provider, you want to make sure you have the skill set to do something, or that you equip yourself with the right partners to do something. And I think take SIPPIO as an example. You put a huge amount of work in enabling your channel to sell Operator Connect for Microsoft Teams, for example. A lot of smaller providers are never going to get on the Operator Connect program directly with Microsoft. They're not going to be able to sell that. So you have to have a partner to help you do that. And I think that's the example that we see in maybe CRM. I think a lot of providers might think, oh, CRM, you need a lot of expertise, you need a lot of specialist capability. Actually, it's a bit scary, it's a bit too much for us. And I'm not saying that's necessarily the way to go, but I think any of these areas, you could potentially do that yourselves, but you could also look at partners that could help you do that. And that could be the same with the Internet of Things. That could be the same as with networking infrastructure or video conferencing kit, Teams rooms or WebEx rooms or whatever they are. I think as long as you equip yourself with the right partner set to help you, that's the main the tool and main avenue you could use.
Yeah, and I think one thing I'll just add as well, and I finally found the percentages after our conversation yesterday. I was like, I need to find the percentages on these ones that I recently sourced from some surveys I looked into, but 61% of CIOs want to consolidate support and managed services into a single provider, and 95% of senior IT execs, they want to consolidate vendors within a year. So there's this huge consolidation effort going on, and it's almost my message out there is almost, you want to have a look at those, what's next, and kind of think about, okay, how many boxes can you tick? Because the more boxes you can tick, the stickier you are going to be, because businesses are looking to consolidate. And a big driver of that is the seamless integration. Do you want to pay for loads of integrations and APIs, which is, again, why I love the SIPPIO solution, that seamless integration into Teams, Zoom, WebEx. But I think, again, if you are a service provider out there, you need to be thinking about what else can we be doing? What else can we be offering? Because if you're not, someone else is likely to be.
Yeah, I can completely agree with that, Matt. And our research shows the same thing. It's actually it's exacerbated even more in smaller to medium businesses. So if you think of businesses with less than 500 employees, for example, they are much more likely to want a converged provider for as much technology as they can get. As you know, that there's that awful phrase in the UK, one throat to choke in terms of how you manage your IT systems, but and technology systems generally. We see that in small and medium organizations. Even as you start to get into large organizations, you see some demand for convergence. Although when you get to really large, there tends to be a bit more, actually, we want best in breed, and we've got the capabilities in-house to manage a couple. But absolutely, that convergence trend is completely applicable, Matt, to definitely to small, medium enterprise.
Yeah, and before I go on to the next question, I will just add that you mentioned around the enterprise, and I remember a stat that always sticks in my mind is the average SMB uses up to 10 different vendors for their technology. The average enterprise uses up to 25. In some cases, it's a lot more, but the average, and actually probably with AI, it's probably the numbers are probably even higher because of people just using their own AI tools and things like that. So it's even higher. So if you are a service provider and you think you're ticking so many of those boxes, is, how many solutions are you offering? Are you touching all the departments of the business that you're selling into? Do you really understand their industry? There's so much that you can do there. And on the industry piece, so I have always been a huge advocate of verticalization, and I think now more than ever with AI, it's got to be a key to success for technology providers, for service providers, that verticalization piece. But what else are you seeing as some of those keys to success for providers now and in the future?
Yeah, so I think one of the key pieces, you mentioned verticalization, especially if we go into markets like the US or like the UK or any of those even any of the developing markets, they're extremely competitive, and standing out from your competition is the sort of number one criteria. So we see a number of different options, or a number of different plays, Matt, to use a sort of an Americanism there on what we see in terms of a standing out differentiation plan standpoint. So verticalization, obviously a key one of those, and we'll talk about that in a lot more detail in a minute. Strategic partnerships. So I talked about it before, picking those right partners who are going to equip you with the solution. And I'm not saying, everyone should sell CRM, but if your customers if you've got a customer base that would be interested in that, equipping yourself with a partner that can enable you to is key. Or if you've got a partner base, that would be very open to a Zoom solution, for example, then that's key to partner with someone who can equip you with that. I think developing solutions specifically for use cases. So this might be outside of verticals, Matt. We talked about, you and I yesterday, we were talking about small business solutions that we've encountered. Yeah. So this might be a particular market segmentation that you've developed solutions for. I think that's a definite possibility. And I talked about earlier on, AI and how businesses know what to do in terms of, how can they use AI? And you talked about some of those examples, summarization. A lot of these businesses, you mentioned, still have Post-its on a whiteboard. They don't deal with this technology every day. They don't understand what the art of the possible is. So helping your customers on that thought leadership journey, helping them understand what the possibilities with AI are really key. And I think finally, sort of differentiating your skill set from your competition. So whether that's vertical expertise, whether it's, expertise in a particular vendor or partnership, whether it's, developing those customized solutions, I think really just differentiating that skill set in terms of what you've got in-house could be really important. So we see a number of different plays in these different areas.
Yeah, and I mean, I look at these, and again, I've been banging the verticalization drum for many years now, and I can easily argue for each one of these points. If you are, going after a specific industries, by all means, keep the slide up because it will remind me which points that I'm talking about. But for example, thought leadership, I'm going to pick on Copilot as the example here. But I remember seeing a stat once, and it was very generic, but it was something along the lines of, using Copilot, you save 11 minutes a day. And I instantly went to, well, hang on a minute. If you're in a small legal firm, you're going to save hours a day, probably. I save more than 11 minutes. I save so much time, and it also depends on the person. I remember when I first started at SIPPIO, all of a sudden I could use Copilot to analyze lots of things that were being sent me and streamline that, so I was saving so much time. So again, if you're driving a verticalization, your thought leadership becomes even stronger to your customers, and also you can speak their lingo, their language, and they really appreciate that. There's stats out there that show that businesses want to work with service providers that speak their language, that understand their industry, their challenges, and so on. Same with solution development. You're right, you could go target SMB, or you could take it one step further and target SMB, I don't know, education, legal. You can really target that, and you're going to develop some amazing solutions. And then strategic partnerships as well. I mean, even, hey, I would love to work with partners that really want to target specific industries as well. And then how do we help strengthen their messaging to those customers to help them drive more sales, more stickiness, more upsell, more cross-sell? If you understand the industry, you can do that much. Nothing's easy in this world, but it becomes much easier when you really understand the industry that you're targeting. So yeah, I just think verticalization really, it supports all of this, from my humble opinion.
Yeah, well, I wanted, and we've talked about verticalization so much in the planning for this. There's one more thing that I wanted to talk about, and I think it's in terms of it's this slide that I really wanted to highlight. And I think so we've done a lot of research at Cavell about how do service providers offer vertical offerings, and what we talked about yesterday, Matt, is that we found that 90% of service providers are at least have some sort of vertical marketing collateral. So that means they've got a page on the website that talks about healthcare or retail, or they've got some sort of case study. But then when you actually start to drill down, less than half of those communications providers actually have developed any bespoke integrations into vertical specific software. So you've got virtually everybody talking about verticals. Actually, less than half have actually done any of that specific product development that you talked about. Yeah. And then if you go one stage further, only around a quarter of those providers have got any sort of dedicated sales, technical, or support teams who really focus on those verticals. So I think it's even within vertical, we talk about verticalization as a differentiator, and the graph on the left here just shows, you know, those most popular verticals that we see service providers develop solutions for. So public sector and government, healthcare, finance and banking, education. But we hear everybody talking about verticalization, and we talk about it, you and I talk about it as a differentiator. Actually, not all vertical solutions are created equally, and you can differentiate by your competition by going up these different tiers of vertical capability. And I think that's a really key point in terms of, it's just verticalizing isn't enough. It's how far you go and what you need to offer for your customers.
Yeah. No, it's, yeah, I mean, I could talk about this all day when it comes to verticalization. I just think there's so much value in it. And I think, again, and one thing I'll kind of finish on with my point, because whenever I talk about this, I always get the impression that if I say to a service provider, a tech provider, hey, you could really focus in on education, I sometimes think what they hear is me telling them to say no to any other business. And that is not what I am saying. If you get to know your customers and understand, okay, well, we've naturally succeeded in these 3 industries, 2 free industries, whatever that might be. Go really deep on those industries, really get to know them, understand the language, understand the challenges, arm your sales team with the right conversational points. You're going to strengthen your sales into those industries. You're going to drive more upsell, drive more cross-sell, whilst onboarding new customers in other industries. And then, hey, once you've kind of nailed those 3 and you really understand what you're doing there, why not add a 4th industry that you can really focus in on? So that it's not saying say no to other business. What it's saying is strengthen your customer relationships, your upsell, your cross-sell, your stickiness to the industries that you're already naturally building up. Because again, I speak to so many service providers that say their marketing is basically word of mouth at this point. So they will have naturally built up niches within their customer base, maybe without even realizing. I've seen that a lot when I've dug into partners, customers, and then gone, hey, 30% of your customers are in the exact same industry. We could really help you build bespoke services and solutions for that industry. Here's battle cards. Here's all the information that you're going to need. So again, just want to be really clear on that. I'm not saying turn down other business. I'm saying strengthen some of your business. Okay. So this was great. Now we do have some questions coming in. So can you see the Q&A as well, Patrick? I just want to double check that you can see those as well coming in.
I can indeed.
Okay, so I'll read them out and then we'll tackle them. So the first one that came in, some UCaaS resellers will have created call charge inclusive bundles based on falling voice usage figures. But I agree with one of your points. If voice agents increase capacity, we may well see a bounce back from messaging to voice driven by consumer convenience. Do resellers have to consider rising voice minutes in their bundles?
Yeah, it's a really good point, and I think exactly that. What we've seen is more and more people, you know, to try and encourage, you know, usage of just have added unlimited minute bundles, because we've at the moment we are still seeing that slight decline in traffic, but I think we are going to have to see that consideration, and I think it'd be really interesting, and we'll get the feedback. You know, we'll ask those large voice carriers globally, and you know what's happening with that traffic. But I think we are going to have to see potentially a bit of a readjustment on what's included in bundles, and see how much the use of AI and the use of voice agent. And we didn't even talk about, you know, machine to machine communication, you know, your AI agent talking to my AI agent. Obviously that's unlikely to be via voice, but it's, you know, data flow. So there's a lot of different factors that come in there. So I think we are going to have to see a reevaluation of those different bundles.
Brilliant. And then another question that came in from Chris. Are you seeing Teams and CCAS running in the same company? I'm hearing Zoom and others are installing CCAS, and the customers are staying with the Teams for MS applications.
So we see absolutely loads of examples of this. So obviously
Yeah.
Microsoft has got Dynamics 365, which works with Teams, but then it's also got its certified list across various different certification levels of third-party providers. So that might be a 5.9, it might be Luware, it might be Anywhere Now. There's a list of, dozens and dozens of certified providers. But yeah, and it's that idea that it's not a new premise of the contact center then using the collaboration system to connect anyone internally to effectively make them a customer service advisor. So that close tie between the contact center and your collaboration system, I think, is really important. I think Zoom's got a really strong story there because it's got a natively integrated contact center within the Zoom suite. But I think Microsoft are going to work on Dynamics 365. That's going to integrate into Teams even better in the future. And yeah, we are seeing a really, and same with WebEx as well. WebEx again, a really strong bond there across both collaboration and contact center. I think there's an inherent link between the two. That idea of the connected enterprise, that Avaya were talking about 20 years ago, hasn't gone away.
Yeah, and on your point around the Dynamics 365 piece, I will just add, I mean, yeah, Microsoft's done a big kind of shift in, for so long, the modern work on Microsoft 365 and Teams team was separate from Dynamics, and they are now one team. So it kind of shows the alignment there internally within Microsoft as well. We just had another question come in via the chat. Are you seeing Zoom clients switch to Teams?
We do, to be honest, we hear examples, and what will generally happen is from an analyst perspective, when you go, so we go to Zoom's events, we go to Microsoft's, we go to Cisco's, they will often bring out examples of when a client has moved from their main competitor. So there are obviously examples of when clients have moved from Microsoft to Zoom. I think in a lot of cases, you could look at the Zoom portfolio. Obviously, they've got Zoom Docs, they've moved into the productivity suite. Actually, from a sort of commercial standpoint, it's very competitive against Microsoft 365, but it doesn't have the breadth of coverage. So there are examples of Microsoft users from Teams users moving to Zoom, and vice versa. You can find examples of those anywhere. I think the key bit is understanding, what your customers' requirements are in terms of what's their primary business, what are their primary business systems? Is it their CRM system? Is it their CCAS solution? And then helping them make a decision on that basis. But yeah, we see examples, and we're regularly given examples from the firms of when, a business has moved from one of their primary competitors to their solution.
Yeah, and I think one thing that I'm seeing in the collaboration, and I've experienced in the collaboration space, especially in larger organizations, and especially where there's been kind of mergers and acquisitions that have taken place as well. If there's a stubborn party, let's say, is they want to stick with using the collaboration tool of their choice. So I've worked in large organizations where 60% of the organization uses Teams for their internal collaboration, and then 40% uses Slack, and it causes tremendous problems. So you'd think with all these tools that we have, that especially in an enterprise, you would think, oh, they're going to be using the best tools, and they're going to be really streamlined and really, seamless communication, seamless integrations with their tools. It's not always the case. And actually, as a service provider or technology provider, unless you start asking the questions of your customers and getting them and speaking to different departments within, because again, in that example, if I spoke to the leaders of the business, they'd say, hey, we use Teams. However, speak to different leaders in the business, we use Slack. So it's understanding that, the more you're engaging with your customers, you might get different answers. It'll open up different opportunities for you, voice being obviously a key one, but there's so much more opportunity there for service providers, technology providers. Unless you ask those open questions and get to know your customers, you're not going to unlock those because you will get different answers. So let's have a look. So I did actually, whilst we're, hang on, I've got a red dot on the Q&A. Let me just have a look here. Hang on. Any thoughts on the viability of the hybrid cloud model? You mentioned some possible Mitel/Unified challenges in Germany, maybe Avaya affected as well. Are these more regional issues more pervasive globally, given the cloud shift you mentioned in the earlier slides? Hang on, Patrick. Maybe I'm just trying to. Oh, there you go.
No, you're absolutely right. I'd muted myself on my own device. Yeah, we're really interesting point. Actually, both Matt asked the question. We are seeing, although we still think, public pure cloud is probably is the end goal for the majority of businesses. Actually, we are seeing a bit more demand for hybrid. That might be necessarily on the PBX or the call control side, but it might be keeping crucial bits of your data on-prem. So it might be keeping your call recording data, for example, sovereign and local to you, and controlling that. And that's something we've definitely seen in Germany, that demand for at least some aspect of the communication estate to stay local. It does depend via region very much. As I said, I think Unify Mitel in Germany has been a particular issue, but I think uncertainty around Avaya globally has accelerated, migration away, both in terms of UCaaS systems, but also on the contact center side. So, but we do see the increasing role of hybrid deployments across the globe, whether that's keeping individual business systems. I don't think it's going to stop whole-scale move to public, especially when it comes to call control. But there are always in our research, it comes back that there's a proportion of businesses which tends to range, depends when we do the surveys, but approximately 5 to 10 to 15% of businesses that say they'll never move to the public cloud. They tend to be, as you can imagine, very heavily regulated, defense, central government, financial services. But that still means these markets are going to get to 85-90% penetrated. So if you take the US as an example, with 80+ million users, that still means there's going to be 70 million users in the public cloud. So it does depend regionally, and there are a lot of inputs into it. We do see hybrid. It's going to be important for 10-15% of the market, maybe.
Brilliant. And then I think one final question from me. And it's funny, when I was in school, I would do anything to avoid homework, but I'm going to ask for some on this call. But is there anything else from Cavell that maybe you've not spoken about today that you think is a hot topic for now or in the future, or even just something that myself or our listeners could kind of take away and look into themselves and do a bit of research on?
Yeah, I think I'd be really interested when I showed that slide about emerging technology areas. So we talk about the Internet of Things, and I mentioned the Canadian carrier that we did some work with. I'd really love to hear about other areas that are what next. There's some really, I always get really and it's because I'm a nerd at heart, really interested in the sort of realms of mixed reality. Are we going to be using virtual meeting spaces? Are we going to be using HoloLens to meet? We talked about the metaverse. There were avatars in Teams. It all seemed to sort of go away. I think in the future, Cisco have done some really interesting stuff with holograms. There's a few emerging companies out of Eastern Europe that are doing some really interesting things with the Apple Vision Pros. So I'm really interested on what's coming next, and this might be sort of 5-10 years down the line. So I'd love to hear from your companies about whether they think there's any viability, and whether we should even be bothered looking at it from a research perspective.
That's a really interesting one, because I attended virtually Zoomtopia for the first time, and the AI companion, the incredible kind of AI realistic to the point where this could be on Zoom, this could be AI. It wouldn't be me sat here on this Teams call. It would be just my voice, and AI would be doing the work for me, essentially. There was some incredible things coming there on Zoom. So it'd be interesting, and we need to kind of go further ahead, but it'd be interesting to see the adoption of that, how it's used. So no, I love that as kind of future thinking, future research, and probably future discussions, because I could probably talk to you all day, Patrick. So I can see we're 2 minutes to go, and we're at time. I want to say a huge thank you. This is obviously the first of these, my first time presenting for SIPPIO. So huge thank you for everyone for attending. Patrick, huge thank you for your slides, your effort leading up to this, and the talking points that we've discussed. Again, we could easily do this anytime. And huge shout out to everyone who at SIPPIO who pushed this out, whether it was on LinkedIn, directly to our partners. They deserve all the credit as well. So yeah, huge thank you. And Patrick, any last words from you? I'll give my guest the last word.
No, just thank you everyone for attending, and I hope everyone found that useful. And I'd love feedback on the research. You can scan the QR code in the back of my screen, or go to cavell.com. We'd love feedback on the research and what areas you'd be interested in hearing more about. So Matt, just echo your sentiments. Thanks for everyone for taking the time to listen today.
Thank you. Have a good day, everyone.